Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And Cyprus is infamous for economic crises going back many years. We all know how, they were basically the first to really push for bail-in regimes, which of course we see in budgets now in different countries around the world like Canada. And we see this push for people for these banks to steal depositors' money when they make bad choices. But John has recently gotten some messages from journalists in Cyprus, and he's done a lot of research on this. He's done a Steemit article recently called Cyprus Cooperative Bank Bail-in or Bailout, New Bank Failure in Cyprus. We're just going into it a bit. He talks about that Cyprus Cooperative Central Bank has failed, and it used to be a co-op bank, but now is 77% state-owned, and goes into the history of it a bit. John, can you go into what's going on in Cyprus? Because this is something that I'm not really seeing pop up on any news stations, surprisingly.
No, of course. There's nobody really wanting to cover anything about Cyprus. Cyprus is a tiny little country. I had the pleasure to be at Cyprus. It's one of the few places that you can actually go and downhill ski during winter time in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's pretty cool in the Troodos Mountains. But let's get back to Cyprus and, of course, its infamous banking problems. Now, it all started in 2012, 2013, when Hellenic Bank and Bank of Cyprus was betting on the failure of some Greek debt. And of course that didn't happen because it got bailed out, and then they were on the hook for a whole bunch of derivatives that they used for bets. And of course the banks failed completely, and they created what they call a bad bank and a good bank of both of them. And the problem is that during that time too, this cooperative bank was not bailed in. But what they did with it, the state bought, 77% of it. And we all know what the state does is not, usually very good management of money. So what has happened over time is that they have, mismanaged. But it was also a whole bunch of bad loans back then. So it's not like it was just the state destroying it. It was a whole wide array of bad loans. Now, if you go and take a look at Cyprus's bad, bank non-performing loans, NPLs as they're called by the financial elites, and you took a look at the stats that I pulled up from 2009 to 2016 from Statista, you can see a rapid rise since 2012 from about 18.38% all the way up to 48.68%. In 2016. Now, of course, the bank that is talked about has 60% bad loans. It's one of the three biggest banks in Cyprus, other than Bank of Cyprus, that was bailed in, and Hellenic Bank. So those three are the major banks in Cyprus. And the problem is that you have 60% of your loans being bad loans. That tells me that the economy is not doing very well. And I go into it in a little bit, some of the reasons behind all this. But of course, if you saturate a market, Cyprus is not a big, nation. So it doesn't take a long time until you have heavily indebted everybody. So suddenly there's nobody more to in debt, and then we have the what I call debt saturation of the market, where there's no more people to borrow to. Well, somebody's gonna have to pay the interest, and if you can't pay it, you go bankrupt. And that's what we see with the banks here. They're really starting to struggle because they have been constantly borrowing up money that should never have been sent out to the public in the first place. And of course you have heavy protests that people say, oh, I'm going to keep my house and so on. First of all, it's all about knowledge and financial IQ, as Robert Kiyosaki says. A lot of these people had no clue about money or anything. They just wanted a house. But nobody told them that there was a huge risk that, suddenly if you lose all your money and you have a house and a mortgage to pay another debt, you can default on that debt.
Well, we've talked about how these kinds of things affect other people before. I was going to ask you how people have been responding to this in Cyprus, but also just the idea that people's money is being stolen to pay for one of just really bad financial planning and obviously vast centralization at this cooperative bank that you're talking about here, which it's just its name alone kind of creeps me out because we know what that usually means. Yeah, but just looking at how this is going to affect people, because obviously they're going to have to take a lot of money from the populace in order to bail this thing out that the free market has basically said and rejected and said, go away, we don't want you. But no, the government's going to come in, steal people's money, and pay off something that has indebted countless people and indebting them more.
Yeah, well, and that brings me over to what actually just happened. The journalist I was talking to, she was mentioning how they had a vote over the weekend about what to do with this bank, and it was proposed that Hellenic Bank, one of the, I think is the second biggest bank in Cyprus, was supposed to get all the depositors and a couple of other assets over, that they would take over, and then what they would do is they would create a special purpose entity where they were going to put all these bad loans. Now, we all know what special purpose entities or special purpose vehicles are used for. They're used to, take stuff off a bank's books, so, the bank doesn't look bad anymore. And then what you can do with them, you can, just go and ask maybe Goldman Sachs or some other guys to create a little bit of a collateralized debt obligation, and then they could put some of this Cyprus debt in the lower tranches of the investment and have a couple of AAA sprinkled on top.
I'm surprised they haven't been doing that yet, considering, just that's usually the telltale sign of a collapse. But really, John, going forward, is this going to lead to a major collapse, or is this just going to be another example of just a perpetual idea of these banks owning the populace and the government's owning the populace and centralizing and manipulating and pushing things forward, and then it coming to its peak, it starts to fall, and then they prop it up again, causing a bigger problem down the road? How long is this going to just go in a circle, or are they just going to finally let it collapse at some point? It's amazing.
Well, I never think the banks will let it collapse. It will collapse, but they won't let it collapse. The central bankers will fight tooth and nail for their system to survive, of course, and they're not willing to have a massive deflation, because if you get a deflation, that means that debt becomes super expensive to pay, so they want inflation, and what you're going to probably see is a heavily deflationary period. And you kind of see, if you look at actually the problems with housing prices in Cyprus, that housing has been in a very deflationary state over the last couple of years. And of course, if you look at wages, has also stayed stagnant in Cyprus. Meanwhile, there's probably a little bit of inflation. So what that does is, when your wage stays stagnant and you lose money to inflation, well, you're going to lose out on both sides, because
that chart just looks so weird. It just looks like an alligator's back or something.
Actually, the reason why it looks like that, Josh, is because every single year they're a massive tourist destination. So you actually have a huge peak, and then it just drops down during off season. So that's why it looks so crazy the whole season, because it's seasonal, labor force. And of course, since 2012, the labor force participation rate has also fallen more. So it's kind of a tumbling economy that Cyprus has, and they're not willing to face the facts that their banking system is completely devastated. And I will just in a couple of seconds, I'm going to actually go through and look at some of the actual banks in Cyprus that are supposed to be maybe a little bit more stable than Cooperative Bank, and have a little bit more force behind it to protect themselves, because Hellenic Bank, that's going to actually take over the Cooperative Bank. Let's look at some of the numbers that they have, and these numbers will really surprise you, because Hellenic Bank actually has, as of, this is 2017 numbers, I looked at their balance sheet from 2017, and you see $65 million, about 65 million euros, not dollars, that they had in cash on hand. Now, they also, if you add on the central bank and other deposits, so the central bank deposit, let me just go quickly through that, so people like, what the heck is that? A central bank deposit is a deposit at the central bank, so a Bank of Cyprus. But what it is, it's most likely, like what it says in the explanation is that it's most likely just digital money at the central bank. It's not usually cash at all. So what that means is probably most of the, like as you can see, the cash is only 65 million, and the 2.29 billion euros that they're supposed to, have in deposits to protect the depositors. It looks pretty good actually if you add the numbers with the central bank, because it goes from having a cash to deposit ratio from 98.8 to a cash plus central bank deposits of 60.50%. Now, the problem is if people want cash out of the bank, they're going to have a huge issue because they have very little cash on hand, as you can see. So this is interesting. Actually, after I gotta do this, I'm going to quickly show what the new bank will kind of look like, because I did the numbers on the new bank, because this is Cooperative Bank, of course, which the talks is about that have failed. They had 108 billion and a million euros in cash, and they said as of June 30th, 70 million euros was withdrawn out of the account. So you can see how they basically got 30 million left, and not very much money at all. And if you look at the actual cash to deposit ratio, it was actually better than the bank that's going to take them over, Josh. That's a pretty interesting one. And of course, it looks a little bit better again if you take the central bank deposits with 71.96%. And then, of course, there's just, I just did the numbers on the other ones. I'm just going to go quickly through the actual cash to deposit ratios. Bank of Cyprus, which was the one that was bailed in 2013, has 83.46. Alpha Bank has 97.43%. Eurobank has 95.49, and these numbers that I'm talking about now isn't even showing the cash, because cash wasn't even on the financial statement. It was together with cash and central bank deposits. So I don't know what it is, and it's still super low protection there. So it doesn't look very good.
Let's be clear for a second for those that might be a little bit confused. When you see 95.49%, that percentage is the amount of cash that's not, or the amount of deposits that are not covered.
Exactly.
That's not covered. That's not covered. That's why there's a big negative right beside the 95.49%. Just want to make that completely clear so people aren't going, wow, they have 95% of their deposits covered. That's not even close.
No, exactly. And it's interesting. So I just want to do all the rest of the banks, and I'm going to finally get to the point here to talk about how bad it is. Well, you got Astrobank, 70.36%. Then you have USB Bank, 88.84%. RCB Bank, 86.86%. CDB Bank has 79.84%. And then, of course, I want to just show you how the new proposed Hellenic Bank will look like when it buys up, because it actually became official that it took over, and of course the government said that, oh yeah, we're gonna guarantee all the money, the $9-something billion that came over with deposits from the other banks. So now you're looking at in the new bank, the Hellenic Bank, they only have 99.12%. Actually, that would be 88% cash to deposit ratio. They only have 0.88%, Josh. 0.88% of cash that they have available. So just a little bit of a bank run there will not boast very well for Hellenic. So you might have a contingent if people actually go in and look at the numbers and see holy smokes, Cooperative Bank was bad, but look at this bank, it's even worse. The new bank that took over the bank.
Which is exactly why you're seeing this push on a global scale for a cashless society, by the way, folks. They bail in or bail out. There's no runs on the banks. They track you everywhere. It's never your money. It's always the banks. They're enslaved to the banking system and the government. And essentially, we are seeing this push out of desperation throughout the world when we see the cash to deposit ratio for most of these banks. Most of the world's biggest banks are absolutely terrible. I mean, that undercuts it. It's unbelievably horrible, and people can throw excuses at it all they want, but as we see us slowly, incrementally going into this cashless society on a global scale, and that's centrally planned, of course, these bail-ins and bailouts, there's nothing we can do. There's absolutely nothing we can do. And on top of that, this insurance on a lot of these deposits, depositor insurance in most places in the world right now is absolutely terrible, and in some places there isn't any. So, I mean, something like that happens, something big happens, and they bail in or bail out your bank. Good luck.
Well, yeah, I actually looked into that in Cyprus. So they have something called the Investor Compensation Fund, the ICP, the ICF, and it's funny. I couldn't find any numbers on how much money they actually had in the pool that was supposed to protect the depositors, and it's only at 20,000 euros now. They went down from 100,000 euro, which was all over Europe, because they just found out that that was a terrible idea. Just even stating that, because what happened in Cyprus, it was complete joke and a lie what happened in Cyprus. But what you got to remember, all these bad debt that's is around the world, and you've seen the massive rise in especially housing prices and trying to prop up the value of the debt. That's what the central banks have done. So now they're trying to exit out of that bad debt and trying to make it look good, because they propped up the value by printing mass amounts of money into the monetary system, and they're trying to sell it off now, the Fed and a couple other central banks. Well, it's a big joke. You're still sitting on a crappy investment, because people in the first place didn't have proper financial education and understood that it was a very bad idea to get into the investment in the first place and buy a home, because your home is not an asset. You got to remember that, because that's what those banksters are telling you. They're telling you like, oh yeah, it's an asset on your balance sheet, the bank, which is actually a liability, because the house only takes money away from you unless you are able to somehow rent out a part of your house and it actually pays off
a little bit of cash flow. And of course, outside of cash flow, if you're in a place like Berlin, as we recently talked about, good luck fixing up your house, because if you do, you can't sell it, because they want to make sure that bubble doesn't burst quite yet.
Planning is lovely, Josh. It's really lovely. All these great plans on sustaining the economy and making the economy prosper. It's fantastic what they're doing, these central banks. The central banks are creating a monetary holocaust, because they, in the first place, created this terrible money, the scam, the Ponzi scheme all around the world. And then, of course, they come out and say like, oh, whoops, all this debt is going bad all around the world. You have all these non-performing loans popping up, and nobody is able to pay their debts. It's because of these bank fraudsters in the first place, tricking people into the system, and then sitting there and always winning, because they either get the asset, the collateral to keep it on their books, or they get a little bit of fees and interest here and there. Yep. But when the money dries up, there's no more interest income, and the banksters are screwed.
Absolutely. So also we mentioned in basically every single video for our new viewers and everything that all fiat currency eventually reverts to its true value of zero. It always has, always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. And of course, on top of that, the fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the markets as well as the monetary system. So you can't put a date on a crash. You just know that there is one coming inevitably. And for that reason, people have to get prepared, be self-sustainable, financially responsible, be independent, not be dependent on those that are dependent on your dependence, which is the banking system and the government. So folks, it comes down to you and food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. And of course, gold, silver, in our opinion, this is an investment advice. Gold and silver are wealth insurance.
I would say history's opinion.
Well, yeah, of course, the gold and silver is wealth insurance, not an investment, folks. If you want to play with paper ETF derivative craziness, then you can, but that's a risk that you take upon yourself, and is getting involved in a very fraudulent system. And then of course there's cryptocurrencies that have fundamental value, the decentralized, properly useful ones that are functioning and have something to provide for the market. But John, I wanted you to go into the bottom line for this report.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is that your banking system is a fraud, and of course the people that got lured in now are looking for, why did this happen to me? Like, why are they taking my house? It's because, of course, the banks knew that you couldn't repay your home, most likely, and they just wanted to make money on you. And what we got to remember, Josh, in 2013, what was really cool was that was the first Bitcoin rise up because of the bail-ins in Cyprus. So it's time, Cypriots, why are you not, starting to use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? Because listen, it worked so well in the other, in 2013 when the banks were failing at that time and the bank runs were, it was easy to get Bitcoins around and trade it, and the economy could really work fine without needing these corrupt banksters. So it's time for you guys to finally rethink it again and look at getting into a cryptocurrency, to start using it as a medium of exchange in the economy, and really really show the world that you can save the economy because the banksters have demolished it.
Yeah, we need competing currency, free market systems, of course. And of course, Bitcoin was created on the back of the 2008 financial crisis as well, which that's considered to be the main reason why it was even created in the first place. Decentralized blockchain technology, or whether currencies or just new infrastructure, that's an incredibly huge innovation. And I think it's important that more people understand it and understand decentralization and not being centralized and pushed into debt servitude from a financial level and elsewhere. And I think that we could really see a massive change in the world when people realize this and build on that. And the market is going to be massive, but it's all competing currency, free market systems, not manipulated by governments and banks. That is very important. Scarcity, application, use, demand. That is what it comes down to when it comes to value, and not a bunch of centralization propping up dead horses that get fat and fall on you and crush you. So thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized by YouTube as they bring in the ADL to flag all of our content as hate speech. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So don't forget to check us out there and find us at Anarchapulco 2019. I know it's early, but this is such an exciting event coming up with Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, Larkin Rose, Jeff Berwick, all the usual characters, and it's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there. Make sure to check the link for Anarchapulco below and use promo code WHAM to save as much as 15% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.